Saudi Arabia and Kuwait have once again opened the way for US military forces in the Gulf, and the Iranian regime has lost one of the few political victories it was still trying to sell as a triumph. This Friday, May 8, 2026, the turning point cuts directly against Tehran. After blocking the use of bases and airspace for the American operation in the Strait of Hormuz, the Saudis and Kuwaitis have backed down on the restrictions. And Trump now has room to revive Project Liberty with planes, ships, escorts, and stronger regional support. Reuters reported, citing the Wall Street Journal, that Saudi Arabia and Kuwait have suspended restrictions on US military access. Although Reuters itself pointed out that it has not yet been able to independently verify the report. I'll tell you all about it in a moment, but right now you'll want to be subscribed to the channel to stay well informed with real-time information at the highest journalistic quality ever seen, with the credibility standard set by Milson Alves. The sequence began with a clash within the Gulf Alliance itself. Trump launched Project Liberty to reopen the Strait of Hormuz and protect commercial vessels, but Saudi Arabia blocked the use of part of its bases and its airspace. Kuwait also took the same restrictive stance this decision weakened. The American operation was weakened at first because Washington needed air corridors, nearby bases, radar, defense, and logistics to escort ships in an area under pressure from Iran. The Guardian reported that Saudi resistance directly affected the Prince Sultan base and complicated the American mission, precisely because Riyadh feared an Iranian response against its own interests. It was during this period that Tehran tried to turn the Saudi blockade into a political victory. The Iranian regime saw the Gulf's hesitation as a sign that the pressure against Washington was working. The Revolutionary Guard began to act as if it had managed to divide the American allies, halt the operation, and impose a cost on Trump's plan. For Iran, it was a diplomatic celebration. The United States had ships, strength, and rhetoric, but faced resistance from the very regional partners they needed to protect. But that perception didn't last long. Iran's insistence on keeping the focus at sea and the exchange of attacks with American forces pushed Saudi Arabia and Kuwait back to a tougher stance. The turning point came when the Saudis and Kuwaitis cleared the way for Washington. According to the report published by the Wall Street Journal and republished by Reuters, the restrictions were lifted after high-level contacts between American and Saudi officials. With that, Project Liberty itself no longer depends solely on ships operating at their limit and once again has support from the ground, air, and regional backup. For Trump, this means being able to escort commercial vessels with closer air cover and use bases in allied territory, and increasing pressure against Iranian structures used for drones, missiles, and surveillance in the Gulf. The American military response has already appeared on the ground. On May 7, 2026, the United States Central Command stated that it carried out retaliatory strikes against Iranian military facilities, including missile and drone launch sites, command centers, and surveillance structures. According to the statement cited by Reuters, the strikes came after Iranian actions against American forces. The same report stated that Iran launched missiles, drones, and small craft at vessels during the passage of 3 American destroyers through the Strait of Hormuz, but no United States assets were hit. The most concrete point so far is that Washington claims to have struck military structures linked to the Iranian operation in the Gulf, while Tehran accuses the United States of violating the truce. The importance of Saudi Arabia lies in its geographic and military weight. Prince Sultan Air Base on Saudi territory is a key element for the deployment of American aircraft, air defense systems, and regional operations. When Riyadh blocked part of that access, Trump had less room to act quickly. When Riyadh backed down, the message changed. Iran was not able to maintain the division within the O, and also comes in as a major player. If time passes, American structures. The same list points out that the catastrophe brings the fight to Udeid. Bahrain hosts the 5th Fleet, the United Arab Emirates has Al Dhafra, and Saudi Arabia hosts Prince Sultan. This network explains why the granting access to airspace and bases is not just a bureaucratic detail. It's the difference between a limited operation at sea and a regional campaign with staying power. The Revolutionary Guard, which tried to celebrate the Saudis' initial retreat, now sees the same door opening against them. The Iranian regime bet that the threat of expanding the conflict would scare Riyadh and other Gulf monarchies. At first it did scare them, but the maritime pressure and the attacks against American forces changed the environment. Now, if Trump decides to expand escort missions or attack launch structures, he will have more regional support than he did when the operation was halted. The Iranian celebration became a bitter calculation. History shows that this kind of turnaround in the Gulf usually provokes a reaction against those who challenge the regional order supported by the United States. In 1990, Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait and put Saudi Arabia under threat. The American response began with Operation Desert Shield, when more than 500,000 United States troops were sent to Saudi territory. In January 1991, the campaign became Desert Storm. The Department of Defense records that the coalition carried out more than 116,000 air sorties and that the ground phase lasted about 100 hours until the liberation of Kuwait. The State Department recalls that 34 nations participated in the coalition. The lesson for Tehran is harsh. When the Gulf monarchies open their bases, airspace, and logistics to Washington, the distance between threat and military response decreases drastically. It also shows how allied bases can change a crisis. In Afghanistan, after the September 11, 2001 attacks, the United States relied on regional support to sustain long operations with air corridors, refueling, and support bases. In Iraq, in 2003, Washington also used a regional network to pressure Saddam Hussein from several sides. Even though the war left deep consequences in the fight against the Islamic State. Years later, bases in Qatar, Kuwait, Bahrain, Jordan, and the United Arab Emirates helped sustain bombing operations, intelligence, and coordination. The pattern repeats itself. When allies grant access, American power stops being just a distant presence and becomes constant pressure. That's exactly what Iran wanted to avoid in the Gulf. Now, what happens next depends on three moves. The first is the resumption of escorts for commercial ships in the Strait of Hormuz. The second is the broader use of bases and airspace in Saudi Arabia and Kuwait to protect these routes. The third is the Iranian reaction in the face of a less restrained American presence. If Tehran insists, the Revolutionary Guard could once again become the target of attacks against drone, missile, and command structures. The Iranian political defeat can be seen in the sequence of events. First, the Saudis blocked access and the regime celebrated as if it had broken the Project Freedom. Then, the attacks and instability in the Gulf showed that the Iranian threat also put the monarchies at risk. Now, Saudi Arabia and Kuwait are pulling back from the restrictions. Trump regains room to maneuver, and the Revolutionary Guard faces an American response that is closer, faster, and harder to ignore. Tehran bet that it could isolate the United States in the Gulf. The reopening by Saudi Arabia and Kuwait proves otherwise. Iran provoked the crisis and ended up pushing its neighbors back into Washington's military embrace. I'm Milson Alves, an international affairs specialist, and my purpose is to keep you well informed with the truth every day. The news links are in the video description. Leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel, and at the end, check out the comments so you can be even more engaged with the Milson Alves community.